All right, so as you can see, finding families to give every child a family is so important. And it's also equally important that we are equipping our churches to come alongside those families and support them. So let's talk about step 3 specifically, supporting families. What does this mean to support a family? Well, as an adoptive family myself, I can tell you this. My wife and I, we would have really struggled and maybe not have made it if we didn't get the support we had from our church. It's hard to say because it was just such an amazing experience to have a church that when you are in crisis mode and really just hanging on, knowing that your church is willing to send people over to your home and to do incredible things. So there was a period of time where my wife, unfortunately, was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer, which landed her on the couch. And me trying to care for her. And as you can imagine, we were just doing everything we could to get through each day on a daily basis. And when our church learned about our dilemma, and this is a few years in after we've adopted Jonathan into our family, they said, hey, how can we come alongside you? And in fact, no, they didn't ask us how they can come alongside us. They told us how they can come alongside of us. And these were the ways that we just kind of described, where the church was being mobilized, and they sent over a group that came and did all of our yard work. If you could imagine during the summer, as my wife is going through chemo and I'm doing everything I can as a dad to really pick up all the pieces that she was unable to meet, the yard work got pretty bad. I mean, we're talking weeds, literally, I'm ashamed to admit it, but they were waist high. And in one afternoon, a team of 10 kids came over from our student ministry, and they were able to get my yard in shape in one afternoon. It was just truly incredible. And we had families and groups coming over every other night with meals, and they were pitching in with our kids for childcare. So I can tell you that supporting families is the key to sustaining families. It's one thing to say, hey, let's do a good job of recruiting all these families to come and take in these kids. But if we aren't able to support those families, there will be people going out the back door just as fast as they're coming in through the front door. And that's why it's important as our church communities to come alongside these families and to help them sustain and keep these kids in their families. Because honestly, some of these children, in some cases, have been placed in and out of different homes, and the last thing these kids need is another experience of a family that is unable to keep them safe and secure in a family and literally heal their brains of some of the trauma experiences they had as children. So if a child has been in all different types of abusive or neglectful situations as a child and is removed from their family because of these abuses, well, we don't want them to experience any more abuse. We want them to come into a family that has a full support system behind them so that these kids can really just let all this pain and hurt out into the open and have that family equipped to handle it. And one of the key ways that we help equip families is something we call support group. So some of our churches have multiple church services on the weekends. And so the family might go to a support group in the context of other families that are also taking in kids, and there they can share some of the experiences and challenges that they're going through, and also hear the solutions. So not only is this support group a place to come and find community and share some of the grief that you might be experiencing in the hard times, but you have a place where you can share the joys. And so families that maybe have had a child for several years and have weathered some storms and figured out some of the solutions, they have an opportunity to share that with some of the families that are maybe newer coming into this situation. And then not only that, our network of churches are also pulling together some great resources. And some of these resources are video-based, where we have university professors teaching about the science behind why kids' behavior happens and the science behind trauma and the effects of trauma and the way that the brain is actually made up of materials that actually have plasticity. So even though they may have traumatic emotional damage from their childhood, with the right types of environments, we can help these kids heal their brains, and then their behaviors will become more what we would call normal, if you will. So these support groups are probably one of the best environments for someone that's going through any kind of a difficulty to find the community that they need, the healing that they need, and also accurate information. And because it's at a church, they get to do all that great stuff within a biblical perspective under God's plan for their life. So finding your purpose as a adoptive parent is such a great and key way that the church comes alongside families. So we really have what we call 4 levels of support for families. So at the bottom foundation is that support group. We would like to have every one of our adoptive, foster, or safe families in a support group network so that they're getting just really the type of support that is unique to their situation. The second thing is within our church networks is we have ongoing training and community events. So some of our churches, have different sizes. So you might have a church that has, maybe just dozens or maybe even 100 people that attend it. Well, that's not a very big church and probably can't put on a really big event. But there's another church down the street that might have thousands of people attending it or a few hundred people. And they have more resources. So within the Peace Plan, we really do have an incredible opportunity to network amongst our churches and pool our resources together to provide events that help nurture families in their situations. And we love to see these family picnics where our adoptive and foster families are invited over for maybe lunch or dinner, and their kids get to be entertained by church volunteers doing interactive games that foster connection within our families. And this helps promote community. Some of our families might even just go on a hike or go fishing, but just different types of fun family activities that are done in the context of other adoptive and foster families, which really just creates unity. So what we've found is like most of our churches aren't large enough that they have clusters of adoptive and foster families. But when we combine all of our churches together in a city region, or even in a county or province region, we see opportunities that through the Peace Plan, we can go church to church and help support other churches' families through our resources. So it's really incredible that God's giving us the opportunity to not only function as a one church, but as the big church with the capital C. And then second benefit is we can also do skills. Our churches may or may not have qualified presenters and trainers within them, but if a church down the street has an amazing teaching and training person in it, they can help facilitate the trainings for these families. And we've seen in Rwanda some incredible opportunities where we have sent people over to Rwanda with this, what we call the TBRI training, which is trust-based relational interventions that we learned from Texas Christian University. So they've trained us on how to help our kids heal. And now with that experience, now we can go to Rwanda and help teach them. And as those Rwandan families have learned and gained the skills that help heal the brains of their kiddos, now they're teaching other churches in their area. And I think this is a model that the church has been doing for years and years and years. And now we're taking the science, evidence-based content and blending it with our biblically based content to provide a very incredible holistic opportunity for parents to not only know what to do, because the Bible tells us how to raise our children and what to do, but we don't always understand that how those types of principles are really clicking in the brains. And so now that we have this university level training combined, we not only now know what to do and why to do it, but now we know how it works. And when you know how something works, it's so much easier to understand, okay, this behavior is not because my child is being defiant or my child's trying to be willful. It's because my child's scared and they are full of adrenaline, And when you start to see through the lens of the really why the child's behaving a certain way on that level, your empathy goes up. And now I can say, hey, I want to train my child up in the ways of God. And I can do it with love because I understand that this willful behavior and this challenging behavior that's coming against me as an authority figure in the family, wow, now I understand how I can address this issue in a loving and compassionate way. So ongoing community events and learning skill trainings are things that any church can do. And some of our churches can host one and invite the other surrounding churches so we can share the load of these types of situations. So we have these 4 levels. So the bottom level being the support groups, and the second level is ongoing trainings and events at our churches. The third one is really in the area of what we call a family care coordinator. What we've learned is really critical both in Rwanda and here in California is having volunteers that do get trained up in what are the processes that these families are going through in the areas of legal proceedings and different things of that nature. Here in California, we have a foster care system, and specifically our church is in Orange County. So we have a federal law system, and then we have a state-level law system, and then that state-level law system is actually carried out at the county level for care. So we work directly with our county officials to learn what our families need to know in order to stay compliant with licensing and following the rules of how their foster children have to have visitations or therapy appointments and all these kinds of things that the family needs to keep in mind. Well, we've trained some of our volunteers to understand that world enough that they can come alongside these families in practical ways. And likewise in Rwanda, we had to make sure that the families were going through a systematic way of keeping their kiddos. Some of these families were involved in savings groups. So if the reason why their children were displaced in the past, and we learned that, well, this family literally did not have the funds to care for the number of children they had, so they thought it was actually a good thing to send the kiddos to the orphanage, not realizing that it was actually damaging in the long run. Now they've returned back to be with their families, and the church has come alongside that family and installed a savings group within their context. And now these family care coordinators, when they come alongside these families to offer help, they understand how this family's plugged into the bigger picture of care and all the details that are involved in it. So that's one side of what they're being trained on learning. And then our care coordinators learn about the other side, which is what the church does offer. So many churches do offer financial benevolence or some sort of emergency relief if it's needed, or churches offer budget classes and teach about financial tithing principles. We know that the Bible talks more about money than almost any other topic. So many of the principles and illustrations we learn is through the context of finances. So we know that God cares a lot about how we steward the resources that He gives us. So coming alongside a family who's struggling financially, so many of our churches could offer care and support in the area of finances. So the family care coordinator learns what are the things that our churches offer. Do the churches have a food pantry or some type of food distribution? I was just talking with a ministry leader literally yesterday, and she was sharing with me how her church has what they call the adoptive parent closet, and it's where the church gathers together resources and hand-me-downs, if you will, and they store it in a closet at the church, and foster families and adoptive families can come to this closet and take things that they need to meet their needs. And their family care coordinators are aware of these things so that when that family has any type of need, that coordinator is able to work with their ministry leaders to find out how they can meet those needs. And the care coordinators also will work with what sometimes are called community pastors, or pastors within or ministers within our churches that are responsible for the community of the church. So if this family care coordinator has a family that just took in a child, like we talked about earlier, and this new family dynamic has created needs, that family care coordinator goes and meets with his or her church, and then his or her church says, well, you know what, we have 3 Bible study groups that are within 1 mile of that family. Why don't we connect them together and see if we can't put the resources and make it all the things that those groups can do to help solve and meet the unique needs. So that is a little bit about that 3rd level. And the last level is crisis coach. So we talked about how in our support groups we have parents and families that have been through things a little bit longer than others. Well, some of those families that we meet through our networks that do have incredible knowledge base on how to care for kids from hard places, they can become mentors to the younger parents in a very concerted effort. So I think most of our communities these days have the ability to call on phones. Like cell phones are all over the world now, and sometimes if you could just have a phone call with someone that's been through what you're going through, it helps you to see the light at the end of the tunnel, because now you can see, wow, the outcome is going to be good. The valley's dark, the valley's hard. And so much of what we've learned in the Bible is about how God carries us through these dark and hard places. And when King David was about to go through one of his really dark and hard places, God paired him up with Jonathan, and Jonathan was able to come alongside of him and be a friend to him. And so many times in the Bible we see instances where God has known one of his precious people will be going through something hard, and he sends them a prophet or someone that has a word of the Lord and has wisdom and just the ability to offer that emotional, spiritual, and mental support to carry them through that dark spot. And so we believe that having just a short list of people we can call when families are going through those really dark places is so critical and helpful for families to know that, hey, you've been through it, or you are going through it. You know how I feel. It's when you hear from someone that knows exactly how you feel that it's going to be okay, it means so much more than somebody that's never experienced it. So those are some of the key ways that we can kind of model this ministry to be effective. So we can support our families through that 4 levels of support, which is support groups, ongoing trainings and events for community, a family care coordinator network, and then lastly, crisis coaches, connection coaches we sometimes call them, people that can mentor the other parents going through it. So I'm hoping that this content is very helpful to inspire you and to help you kind of start to see what launching a ministry of orphan care in your church would look like. When we launched it here at our church many years ago, we didn't always know everything that we were going to do. We didn't know everywhere God was going to take us. And over time, we've learned a lot of things, and we've made a lot of mistakes, to be honest with you. I have to say that whenever you're in ministry, chances are you're going to make more mistakes than you're going to make successes when you're innovating and trying things out. The cool thing is that when we do it together, especially in the context of the peace plan, where we have churches all coming together and sharing best practices, we get opportunities to learn from the experiences of others and not have to make all the mistakes ourselves. We might find that as we're stepping out to try something new, there's going to be an element of fear in doing so. And we have a saying that it's called fail fast, meaning don't be afraid to try something new, because you know what? When you try something new and you're not too sure about it, you're going to gain 2 things no matter what. If it works out great, you're going to gain the knowledge that, wow, hey, this thing really works. And if it fails, you're going to learn, okay, this thing doesn't work. Either way, you're going to come out with education for yourself on things that work and don't work. But one of the things that we want to do is in some of our future trainings that hopefully you'll get a chance to check out are some of those things that we know that really do work, and that we have the evidence and experience testimonies to help share exactly how they work, so that when you get a chance to do them in your church, you'll be able to do them the way that we've found works time and time again. So to wrap things up, we just want to share the basic overview that we want to find a family for every child, no matter where on this planet they live. And we want to equip the church to support them. Because we know, as we talked about earlier, that there's a church in pretty much every part of this world. And if we really, as churches, get together and say, you know what, we know what God's design for kids are. Kids are supposed to be in families. And we know that God wants us to have a church everywhere in every nation. Then why wouldn't we use what God's already said and designed as our method of making a difference for kids that are outside of family care? So that is orphan care pretty much summed up into a 3-step process. Find families, equip the church, and support the families. Thanks for coming today.